In the new Power League, strategy is everything, and I've basically figured out a formula that you can use to always guarantee that you're going to get the optimal picks and the optimal bans going into any game in Power League. So if you want to climb the ranks as quick as possible, make sure to watch until the very end so you can understand every aspect of this brawler picking strategy. And believe it or not, it doesn't always involve picking Mortis. So first, let's talk about the strategy for when you're in a team of 3 and you can communicate with all your teammates. I will talk about what you should do if you're in solos later in the video, so stick around for that. So first, let's talk about the ban phase. And now there's a very different strategy you want to adopt, whether or not you win the coin flip and are going to be picking your brawlers first, or whether or not you're going to be picking second. So let's first talk about the case when you're going to be picking your brawlers first. Now with the bans, you ban at the same time, so you're not going to be banning the brawler first, but the fact that you are going to be picking your brawlers first is going to inform your ban. So the first thing you want to do is just get a general idea of what strategy you want to go for, depending on what the selected map and mode are. Like if you want to go for a more tanky comp with like a Poco and a tank, or a Byron and a tank, or if you want to go for more long range brawlers like Colt and Amber, or if you want generally more area control if you're playing in something like Hot Zone, just get like a general idea of what you want to go for. And you don't really have to talk with your teammates about what this is, but just keep in your mind what sort of strategy you're going to go for. But you also have to know that you're probably only going to end up having 2 brawlers that fit in this style of comp. And I'll tell you why that is later on in the strategy, but it doesn't affect what brawler you're going to ban. So if your comp idea has like a single hard counter, then first and foremost you want to ban that brawler right away. Now this rarely happens because most of the time there are multiple brawlers that fulfill the same role that could counter your comp. So generally speaking, you aren't going to need to ban any hard counters, but if there is just one particular brawler that you will auto lose to, make sure you ban that brawler. But if there are multiple hard counters, you actually don't want to ban any of them because they're going to be able to get one of those hard counters down the line anyway, and so just banning one of them sort of wastes your ban since they're going to be able to counter you anyway. So you want to ban something else. And if your comp doesn't have a single hard counter, then the next thing you want to consider is if there is a really good brawler on the map and mode that you're playing that no one on your team is really able to play well, or no one's really comfortable with playing that brawler, because being comfortable with a brawler is very, very important in terms of getting wins consistently. So if none of your teammates are really experienced with a brawler that's really, really good on this map and mode, then you want to ban that brawler. That's going to keep the game on an even playing field, because essentially that brawler would be someone that your opponents could always pick, but you could never pick because it would just be bad since you're not really comfortable with that brawler. So if you can ban that, then it puts you and your opponents on an even playing field again. But if that's also not the case and you're pretty much comfortable with all the best brawlers on the map, then you want to ban the 3rd best brawler if you were to rank all of them on that particular map and mode. And it's kind of weird that you'd want to ban the 3rd best brawler, but let me explain why that is the best choice. If you were to ban the best brawler, then it doesn't really have much of an effect, because you take away the best brawler, it takes it away for both teams. So then you can pick the 2nd best brawler, which would be the new best brawler, but then your opponents would have the 3rd and 4th brawlers to pick next, and that's essentially equivalent to you picking the best brawler and then picking the 2nd and 3rd best brawlers. Like you pick a particular brawler and they pick 2 brawlers that are 1 rank and 2 ranks below. So banning the 1st brawler isn't really going to have much of an effect. Now if you end up banning the 2nd best brawler, there are a couple possible situations. If your opponents then ban the best brawler, then it's just like before. The originally 3rd best brawler now becomes the best brawler to choose from, and so you pick that, they pick the 4th best and 5th best brawlers, and it's not really much different than if there were no bans at all. So that's not a good situation. But if they don't ban the best brawler, instead ban something like the 3rd best brawler, then you have the 1st best brawler to pick from, which is great because they don't have the 2nd or 3rd best brawlers to pick from. So then the next best play for them would be to pick the 4th best brawler, and you would be picking a brawler that is 3 tiers higher than theirs, which is a pretty good outcome. But if you ban the 3rd best brawler, you can actually get an even better outcome. So in that situation, let's think about what happens if you ban the 3rd best brawler and they ban the best brawler. Then it's in your best interest to pick the 2nd best brawler, and then they'll pick the 4th best and the 5th best brawlers. But the gap between what you picked and what they picked is actually 2 levels, because you picked the 2nd best and they picked the 4th best next. We can compare this to what happened if we banned the 2nd best brawler and they banned the 1st best brawler. There isn't that same gap. We would pick the 3rd best, they would pick the 4th best. So there's only a 1 tier gap there, whereas with the 3rd best brawlers, we can guarantee that there is going to be a 2 tier gap in between the brawlers that we pick. And in the other situation, if they ban the 2nd best brawler, then like we were talking about before, you pick the 1st best brawler and they pick the 4th best brawler and the 5th best brawler, and there's a 3 tier gap there. I won't really go into the details of why, but it actually is in the best interest for your opponents to counter by banning the 5th best brawler. But all that aside, banning the 3rd best brawler is going to result in the best possible outcome, because it guarantees that your brawlers are going to be 2 ranks higher than them, if we're considering how we rank all the brawlers for the game mode. Now, if they end up banning a lower brawler, then you would pick the best brawler and they would pick the second best brawler. So in that case, your brawlers won't be 2 ranks apart, they'll only be 1 rank apart. But 1, I feel like that's not going to happen too often. And 2, once you get so far down the ranking system, most of the brawlers become close to even anyway. So even if that situation does happen, it's no worse than if you were to ban the second best brawler. It's just that banning the third best brawler opens up more options overall and has a higher likelihood of giving you a more favorable option. So that's how you should consider going into the ban phase if you're picking your brawlers first. Now, going second, it's actually a lot easier. What you just want to do is ban the best brawler on the map, and that's basically it. You don't have to consider really what sort of comp you're going in with, because generally speaking, you're going to want to react to what the first team is doing more than you want to sort of generate your own ideas. So all you want to do is just ban the best brawler on the map, ensure that your opponents can't use it, and this also minimizes the damage if they do the optimal strategy of picking the third best brawler, and that's basically it. So all of these ban strategies were assuming that each of the brawlers had strict ranks that you could place them in for any given map or mode, but some of the times there'll be brawlers that are just equally good at the very top of the list. So there might be like 2 equally good brawlers that are the best for this map, or 3 equally good brawlers. And in this situation, there are different strategies that you can adopt. So we already covered what happens if there's just 1 best brawler on the map. You don't want to ban them if you go first, because you want that option available to you, and you do want to ban them if you go second, so that way you don't give the first team the option of picking them. Now, if there are 2 equally good brawlers on the map, you actually don't want to ban either of them if you go first, and you also don't want to ban either of them if you go second. And the reason for that is, if you go first and you ban them, well, the opponents can either not ban them, in which case you would get the other best brawler for free, or they also ban them, and then you're on an even playing field. No one gets the good brawlers. But if you end up not banning either of them, and your opponent bans one, well, then you get the other brawler for free. And if they don't ban either of them, then each of you gets one of the 2 equally good best brawlers. And so once again, you're on even footing. So you can see that we have the same situations whether or not you ban either of these brawlers. And so in that case, you want to opt to not ban either of those brawlers and use your ban on something else that'll get you a bit more value. And we can apply the same logic if there's 3 top brawlers that are just equally good on a given map and mode. You don't want to ban them if you go first, and you don't want to ban any of them if you go second. Now let's move on to the phase where you actually pick your brawlers and determine what you're going to go in with. By this point, you know what the bans are, so you know what you're working with, and you can know if you're the first team, whether or not you want to continue with that idea you had in mind, or if the bans just sort of threw that idea out the window and you're going to need to come up with a different idea. So if you go first in the picking phase, you just want to pick the best brawler that's available to you. And then later down the line, you'll get your second and third picks, and they will both happen consecutively. Your opponent won't get to choose in between them. And so if you ended up banning the only hard counter to your comp, then for your second and third picks, just pick the best brawlers that fit into your comp style. But if you didn't ban a hard counter to your comp, or there were just multiple hard counters to your comp, then what you have to do is, well, you can pick one brawler that fits in with your comp style, but for that last brawler, you have to pick a brawler that doesn't leave your team vulnerable to any counter brawler. So if you're playing in Bounty and you have like a Piper and a Tick, you don't want to pick another squishy brawler for your third pick, because if your opponents pick Mortis, Jackie, Edgar, you're just losing that game. Like, you have very, very little chance of actually winning if you leave yourself vulnerable like that. So you have to make sure that if you're picking first, your team needs to be balanced and not vulnerable to any counter, because your opponents will always pick the best brawler to completely destroy whatever strategy you have. So you want to make that option not available to them. Now, on the other hand, if you're going second, you won't get the first pick, but when you do get around to picking, you'll get to pick 2 brawlers at the same time. So for those 2 brawlers, you just want to pick the brawlers that are good on the map and to have some sort of synergy together, because since your last pick is probably going to be intended to counter the first team, you want to make sure that at least some of your brawlers have synergy together. So you want to do that with your first 2 picks. So you maybe want to pick like a Poco or Byron and a tank, or maybe pick a support brawler like Ruffs or Jean, as well as a long range brawler, things like that. Just brawlers that work together and maybe don't fulfill the exact same role, just so that you know you'll have answers for whatever your opponents pick for their second and third choices. And then, like I said, for that third slot, it is going to be the last pick of the game. Honestly, probably the best chance you have at winning the game, because you know every single other brawler that's going to be played in the match. So you just got to pick the best brawler for the map that also counters your opponents as hard as possible. And if they've picked well and picked a comp that's very balanced, and honestly you can't really think of a good way to counter it, then just pick the best brawler that synergizes well with whatever else your teammates have picked. And that's going to leave you in the best possible position, whether or not you pick second or first, to have the better brawler brawlers and capitalize on that to win the game. Now, if you're playing with solos, there's definitely a lot less strategy because you can't communicate among your teammates. So whenever you see a map in a mode and you're going in solo, you just sort of want to think about what the top best brawlers are for you personally, which ones you're most comfortable with that are also the best on this map. And if you do have the choice to ban, you want to ban a brawler that's the best on this map that you're not good at, because that just puts you in a safe spot, because if your teammates also don't pick that brawler or just aren't good with that brawler, then you know your opponents won't be able to take advantage of you by playing that really good brawler. Or if for your specific brawler there is a hard counter, it's also a good option to ban that as well. But other than that, your ban honestly doesn't really matter, since you have no way of telling what your teammates are going to pick. They could go crazy for all you know, and what your opponents are going to pick. They might not pick what you think are the best brawlers for the given mode, so it definitely is a lot more up in the air, and the bans definitely aren't going to be as meaningful. But that is a sort of strategy that you can adopt. It's pretty similar to the team strategy, just with a lot fewer conditions involved. And then in the picking phase, it's pretty individual. You just want to pick whatever the best brawler available is at the moment, and if you're the last person to pick on your team, you want to make sure that your brawler completes the comp so that it's balanced if you're the ones picking first, because you don't want your opponents to counter you. Or if you're picking second and you're the last person picking on your team, you just want to pick whatever counters the other team as much as possible. And that's going to be the strategy for Power League. Do this and you're going to be winning a ton of games. Don't forget to subscribe and join the Send Squad. But that's all for today, guys. So see you later.